Hello, Trinity Tigers, and welcome to Learning Together live webinar series as part of the Lifelong Learning Initiatives presented by Trinity's Office of Alumni Relations. There are over 170 registered alumni today, many of you who are attending your first webinar, so welcome to everyone. My name is Jacob Tingle, class of 1995, and the director of the Experiential Learning Office at Trinity University. And it is my pleasure today to introduce today's webinar speaker, Josh Sigman, class of '01. He's Vice President and Senior Loan Officer with Legacy Mutual Mortgage. Josh's strengths are leadership, negotiation, communication, and closing skills, and he has more than 15 years of experience in professional sales in the mortgage industry. Josh Sigman will discuss best negotiating and closing skills based on personality profiles. And considering the length of his presentation, it's going to be divided over 2 webinars, so make sure you sign in next Monday at the same time as well. The discussion on personality profiling will provide insight into the 4 basic personality profiles, uncover the best closing and negotiation techniques for each personality, educate how each personality makes decisions, and review how to best communicate with each personality. Please know that you'll be able to submit your questions as you listen to Mr. Sigman, and he'll be happy to answer them following and even during his presentation. And Josh, I apologize, but I have to duck out and go to class, but I look forward to watching the rest of the webinar on the Tiger Network.
Kids are more important.
James Sanders, class of 1998, and current president of the Trinity Alumni Association, will be here to moderate during Q&A. So, ladies and gentlemen, Josh Sigman.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is a blast from the past. I got to walk through the campus here on the way to Coates, and it's changed quite a bit. So if you haven't been back on campus in a few years, I recommend everyone get back here. But I was very pleased that I was invited to speak on this, and it's something that I think is really important, not only to current students, but also to all of us that are alumni. And the reason why I picked this topic is I think that at the end of the day, understanding people is what this topic is all about. It's about basically there's 4 personalities. There's lots of different tests you can take in interviews. I'm sure you've heard of Myers-Briggs or DISC or things like that. I'm going to focus on the DISC in this case because it's probably the most prevalent one. But at the end of the day, I really do believe that when you understand people, it's easier for you to get better responses. It's easier to get more out of your team, out of your spouse. It's easier to manipulate your children when you need to manipulate your children a little bit. But everything from how do you win that one coveted spot in an interview over the next best person, or how do you get a promotion and ask the right way? How do you communicate better with clients and make them enjoy the experience because you're speaking their language? That's what all this is about. I will let you know that some of the forms I'll be reading off of today, I'll make sure that they're available to Trinity, and they'll follow up afterwards to share those forms with you. But basically, let's get started. When you think about DISC, and I say DISC, it's D-I-S-C, DISC profiling. Where you really start is understanding what the characteristics of each ones are. So if you want to take a few notes, I'm going to kind of work through what these people look, sound, and feel like. I want to talk about some of their weaknesses that they have. I definitely want to talk about triggers. Triggers being what one thing for each of these personalities do you not want to step on? What's the landmine that's out there that's going to destroy your relationship, whether that's with a coworker, a client, or a spouse? I think we step on landmines all the time. We don't know why. We didn't think we did anything wrong, but this will kind of explain those things. I also want to talk about some values to the team, so you can start understanding this on a team basis, and then also what those weaknesses to the team are as well. And why am I qualified to do this? I've got 330 employees currently. I'm one of 2 people at Legacy Mutual that run the company, and through those interviewing processes and hirings and firings, for the most part, what we always find out is communication is typically the issue why things don't work out in sales, in operations, why there's a conflict at work, conflict with spouses. And so through those interviews, we keep on trying to seek more information to improve the process. I love how that's aligned with the purpose of these webinars, which is to keep on providing information to alumni over the years. So when you start with D, a D personality is a driver. They're dominant. One thing to note, only 10% of the world is a driver dominant personality. 10% is a D, so don't just say that's me for sure. We all have a little bit of these elements in all of us. but 10% of the world is a driver. And so what you typically see as far as characteristics, they are definitely typically ego-based. They are problem solvers, they're risk takers, they're very assertive, self-starters, time conscientious. They really typically naturally go to what's most important and deal with it first because they naturally understand time is money. That's the general overall characteristics. When you think about who, what, when, where, and why, a D just wants to know what. What do I have to do next? What's the next step? What? That's typically the question that a D is answering internally. And so if we can provide that information for making decisions down the road, what I'm going to bring in value to this organization, what I'm going to bring in value to you as my client, or what I'm going to bring in value to you as my employee, those are the questions that I'm trying to answer as a D. As far as value to the team, typically a D is the visionary of the team. And, if you think of what companies dream really big, there's typically a D driver at the helm that's making the big decisions, the leaps of faith, the understanding directionality of who's going to be Uberized next and why. That's typically going to come from a D. So they play, like I said, they place a very high value on time. They challenge the status quo. Just because we've been doing it this way forever doesn't mean it's the right way, so let's keep on tinkering with it. They're innovative. One of the ways to motivate a D is with challenges. I bet you can't figure out blank. I wonder if you can get this done or get these many sales in this month, or I dare you to make this many calls in a day. Those are all things that actually motivate a D that typically will demotivate other people. So you've got to watch out for that as well. Here's the weaknesses, and if you're a D in the audience, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here, but they'd like to overstep authority quite a bit. They have an argumentative attitude. One of my mistakes I've made in my marriage over the years is that I like to fight for fun, not because I particularly have a strong interest in a talking point, but I just like to debate. We'll use the word debate, not argue as much, but I like to debate issues and just keep on challenging it. But sometimes that oversteps, in the workplace, that could be a problem. To challenge what the boss says, that doesn't always happen forever. And so another big problem that a lot of Ds have is they typically dislike routine. So you can have a high achiever in a specific spectrum of a job, but because you ask them to show up and do the same thing day over day, what they'll typically do is master that routine, and then they want to change the second they've got it all figured out. Well, if you think about it in terms of like a sales arena or something like that, typically learning to love the grind is exactly what it is that makes most successful people in business or in sales or in operations really successful. They get really good at doing it, and the second they figure it out, they typically want to go get away from it, and they forget what it was that they did repetitively that got them where they are. I think about the rule of 10,000 hours. It takes 10,000 hours of anything to master the craft. And so a lot of people have problems getting to 10,000 hours when they're a D. I want to talk about communication here because this is where a lot of mistakes are made in communicating with a client or another employee or boss, or trying to get your words across in a way that they're not listening to. So communicating wise, you need to speak in bullet points. And you need to make sure that it's on the things that are most important, not the things that are a waste of time, right? In this day and age, so much of our communication is unfortunately done through texting and emailing. And so I'll tell you right now that I'm a 100D, I'm a 99I, I'm a 12S, and a 0C. So I'll kind of explain this as we go through. So my point in saying that is being a 100D, I literally like seeing number 1, 2, 3, here's the tasks, and that's the end of the email. I don't need flowers. I don't need to know what's going on with you in the weekend. It's not that I don't care. It's just not my communication style, right? So typically, in my normal day, I'll get somewhere around 300 emails in a day. And if what's not most important is, if what is most important is not in literally the subject line or the first sentence, I typically don't read the rest of the email. It could be called a fault, but it just is what it is. In time management, I don't have time to read the entire length and breadth of every single email. So if you're emailing or texting or speaking with a D, quite often you can irritate them or talk yourself out of a sale or over communicate details to somebody that it's just not that important. Just tell me the most important things. I like to speak about buying experiences in general to kind of illustrate all these different personalities as well. The last time I bought a car, I literally drove up to the dealership. I pointed at my existing car, which I liked. It was a truck. It was a GMC gray truck. The reason I know that is because my last, and the previous one were all GMC gray pickup trucks. So I pulled up, I literally said, "Do you have that truck?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you have that color?" They said, "Yes." I said, "Figure out the price, email it to me because the color was in a different city. Let me know when it's here and I'll come buy it." That was the end of my D decision making. It wasn't trying to decide on gas mileages between these two makes and models, and I hadn't shopped the internet for the last 40 hours of the day. It's just the difference of D's in their communication. So all that being said, and the reason, guys, why I'm taking so much time trying to create the picture around these different personalities is, first, you need to understand what's out there. Second, you need to identify who you are. And then third, you need to figure out how you can use this to your advantage and what kind of questions to ask people you interact with to help identify who they are so you can speak in their language, okay? So the biggest thing for me always is, what is the landmine? Meaning, what do I definitely not want to do when speaking to somebody that would hurt their feelings or make them get turned off or whatever? And for a D, the number one thing for them, the biggest trigger is being taken advantage of. See, when a D is, like I own and run a company and a team, and I've got a lot of employees that I trust to do their job well. I do not micromanage them at all, ever. And so I trust people to do their jobs and to say what they, and to do what they say they're going to do. But the second that I find them untrustworthy, I am unable to go back ever. It's kind of like the mafia. You're dead to me. Speaking with other very high level Ds, they feel the same way too. If you want to think of it from a client perspective, if you've ever wondered if you're in a sales position or even in a service position, and you're talking with somebody that seems happy-go-lucky and it's been perfect, they're the easiest client to work with of all time and then all of a sudden they dive in and they are completely micromanaging every task, every follow-up, every email, every call, everything. It's because they lost the trust in you, or they lost the trust in your organization. And that's why they feel the need to dive in, because no one can do it the way I can do it. Remember I said D's are egocentric a little bit. And so when we feel the need, we're willing to get really dirty and roll up the sleeves and dive in and take care of business. And so it's really understand in that case, just to do the check-in of how are you feeling? Is there anything extra can do for you? But more importantly, just do what you say you're going to do. That's the most important thing to a D. Moving on to an I. Everyone likes an I. I's are influencers. I's are salespeople. I's are people. My wife is a high I. And I literally have never met somebody that openly dislikes my wife. It's really interesting. I's are the people that go into a restaurant and leave with 5 Facebook friends. That's an I. They're promoters. They're enthusiastic. They're engaging. They're energetic. Some other things you would describe them as is they're trusting. They're optimistic. They're impulsive, and they're emotional. Emotional is the key word here. Emotional is the key word here. And so the reason why I'm pointing this out is they like people. They choose to work with people that they like. Whether it's a boss, an employee, or a customer, they choose to work with people that they like. It's all an emotion-based decision. As far as being where their asset or value to a team is, one big thing an I has is that they're typically creative problem solvers. They're typically the one who say, I don't know how to fix this, but what ideas do you have? And they think of all sorts of off-the-box, weird, cool ideas. Whether it's marketing related, whether it's just a new process to do, like just a new, why are we doing it this way? Let's challenge the status quo as well. But here, they're the ones that actually come with some great ideas. They're typically great encouragers. So if you're on a team and you've got the one person that seems to be the cheerleader of the team, they're most likely an I. Because they care about how other people feel, because remember, their connectivity is emotional. They motivate others to achieve. And so if you think about a person at a company that might be a sales manager, you definitely want these people to be I's, because they need to be liked, they need to like other people, and they need to help them achieve the next goal. All those things are very valuable to the team. They typically have a positive sense of humor. They take things with a grain of salt. They don't take things so seriously when it comes to humor. And then they like to negotiate conflict. It's really valuable to a team. So they look at conflict in a way that it's an opportunity to grow our relationship. So we're going to work our way through it, because the most important thing after this conversation is that we leave this relationship intact. And other personalities don't always think that way. Okay? Bottom line, as far as if you want to motivate an I, social recognition matters. So these are the people you say, hey, everyone stand up and give a round of applause to Christy. Christy did this exceptional thing for our client. Or let's read this email that Bryn received off to everybody because she did this great thing for our customer. Those are really important ways to motivate I's. They thrive on social recognition. Weaknesses, though, are important as well. Not all, but some care more about popularity than tangible results, right? Which means that quite often I's in leadership roles have a very difficult time reprimanding, writing up, saying the things that need to be said, because they're concerned with the friendship and the preservation of friendship. So sometimes there's a big problem in disconnecting from what the job is versus us being in relationship together. As far as details go, they are non-existent. They are very inattentive to details. It's just not fun for them. And I use the word fun because it's very much that. If it's fun, they're all in. If it's not fun, they are not interested. They tend to overuse gestures. You've probably already seen my hands, which I'm clasping underneath this table. They've already done this a few times. I know that because I'm a 99I. I actually, when I was seated here today, the first thing I asked this awesome group in the studio is, can I stand up and walk around? Because I tend to teach that way a little better. I've got a little bit more energy. And they said, no, you have to be strapped to this chair. The lights are where they are, and you can't move around. So I don't hold that against you guys. You guys are doing a great job. As far as other weaknesses go, they tend to listen only when it's convenient, which is sometimes hard for us to relate to. But if you're an I, you know it's true. Another way to say that is you're not always present. Okay? Meaning that in the moment, you might keep on typing away your email while somebody's in your office trying to talk to you and you're not giving the attention. So when it's convenient, you'll talk. When it's not convenient, you'll ignore. Communication styles. This is really important. So as far as emails or text, like I said on a D, just tell me what I've got to do next and I'm all about it. But now you better check in on what happened with them, their wife, their kids over the weekend, because otherwise you don't care about me. And so it's really important to slow down when you're about to communicate with an I and literally start with, how are you doing? Or weave in something from a previous conversation. Hey, last time we spoke, I remember you talked about how your chocolate lab was sick. How's your chocolate lab doing? What was his name again? And that's kind of a really important connection point for an I in communication. So leading off in texts and emails, with the small chat, the chitty chatter, that's really important. So if we know that that I's are all about people, then the next question is, well, what's the landmine? What's the biggest fear? And I think it becomes very obvious when you think that they care about what other people think about them. So the answer is rejection. It's social ostracization. It's rejection. That's a big landmine. So what I'm saying here is, and I've done this before in my company multiple times. So when I've skipped the small talk, when I haven't checked in with an employee for quite a while, and I'm just speaking all business, they think I'm mad at them. Now, my wife is also a very high I, very high S. So sometimes when we just go through the routine, I've got 3 kids under 10, 7, and 5. We've got sports everywhere. Literally, if we want to hang out, we get to hang out on Tuesdays, because Tuesdays is the one day we don't have sports or after-school activity or church or something going on. And sometimes I forget to just small talk with my wife. And so when that happens, about a week, 2 weeks later, she grabs me by the arm and says, what's wrong with you? What did I do? Is something wrong? And that's just because they feel that if we're not interacting, then I must be mad or we must not like each other. Okay? As far as S's go, oh, by the way, I think that the studio audience, if you have questions, you can always you can type in. And if something relevant comes up in the moment, I'll make sure that I address them. Otherwise, I'll have a few minutes of Q&A at the very end. So once you move on from I, you go to S's. I should say that the I, by the way, was 15% of the nation is an I. Remember I said 10 was a D, 15 is an I. The vast majority of the world is an S. 60% of the world is an S. Okay? So what is an S personality? S's are stable. They're great listeners. They're steady. They're possessive of their place of work, of their business. They're very big team players. They like to be part of something. They're understanding. They're friendly. They like to follow the rules. Those are all typical characteristics of an S. They're here to not rock the boat. In fact, change is a big problem for an S. Okay. What they're asking in their internal clock is they're asking why. Why am I doing this? Why am I being asked to do this? And so we have to address that when we're asking a client for a document. We have to address it when we're asking a teammate to do something additional because they're questioning, like, how's my stability? I'm in the mortgage industry, for example. And so if I ask a client for a document, I don't say, hey, everything's great, we're on track. By the way, though, the next thing that's in the process that everyone needs to get is this one document. If I skip that and just say, give me this document, they're saying, oh my God, there must be something wrong. Why did he ask for the document? And if you don't answer that question, the answer is, and I've heard this many times before, in the absence of information, we jump to the worst case conclusion. Very true of an S. In the absence of information, we jump to the worst case conclusion. So you got to give the why. Here's why I need this. It's okay. It's natural. It's part of the process. Okay. So what's the value to the team? A lot. Okay. You cannot have too many chiefs and no Indians. These are Indians. S's are typically the Indians of the team. So they're the doers. They're reliable and dependable. They're loyal team workers. Loyalty is key in growing a thriving business or being part of a highly functioning team. They're compliant towards authority. They're compliant in general. They don't want to break the rules. They're good listeners, which is nice to have on the team, especially if you're in the customer service world. They're patient. They're empathetic. They're good at reconciling conflicts, again, because these are also an emotional people. S's are emotional. They value that relationship, and so they will listen to and work through issues as a team or with a consumer. You actually motivate S's through friendship, which sounds weird, but literally, if you've ever had somebody that you've heard somebody say, that guy would run through a wall for me, it's because you're friends. And so if the vast majority of the world happens to be S's, then that would be a very normal statement to say of a lot of people. That guy would bury the body when I remove him from the face of earth for dating my 10-year-old daughter. Like that's the conversation I've had in my head before, right? Possible weaknesses. They resist change. S's resist change. So when you think about the speed at which our world changes these days, S's tend to slow that process, right? You think about Uberization of not just the transportation industry, but it's coming in all industries, is very, very important to understand that and explain the why of why we need to do these 3 extra things in this shorter time, or why we need to adopt this new technology, or why we need to try to move around people different seats on the bus. For fun, remember I'm a D, so I just like to argue for fun or cause conflict for fun just to see how people react. I'm not joking about this. I think last year I had 16 people on my personal production team, and about 60% are S's. And one day I literally just had everyone move desks just to see what would happen. And I didn't explain why. I literally just had everyone move desks. And literally I lost about 50% of production that day because everyone's wondering who did something wrong, or wondering what the issue was. And that little thing, that little bit of change was crazy. By the way, if you want an employee to quit you, if you happen to be in a boss perspective, mess with their pay. Stability matters. You mess with their pay, they're going to be looking for a different job tomorrow, right? So it's just really important to understand that. So weaknesses, like I said, resist change. It takes a long time to adjust to the change. So even if they are the rule follower and they say, okay, boss, yes, I'll do that, the reality is they have a hard time, and it takes time adjusting to the change. One of the hard parts is, my wife knows I talk this way, and I've got about 50 weaknesses. She has maybe 2, okay? But my spouse holds grudges. S's hold grudges. So she fights dirty every once in a while. When we get in an argument, she brings up something I did 10 years ago, and she won't ever let it go. So S's hold grudges for whatever reason. I think I think that's unfair, and we need to move on. But I need to understand that's really the case. S's are sensitive to criticism. This is really important in any kind of future job or current job, to understand how people deal with what you might think is a good bit of feedback to improve their value to an organization, how they're receiving it is equally important, right? So you have to take a lot of time doing the poop sandwich, tell them something really great about themselves, give them a little bit of information about how to improve at the job, and then finish saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. I'm not firing you. I just want to see you get a little better, but I love you, I love you, I love you. So I call it the poop sandwich. Criticism does matter, obviously, and it's a receiving of the criticism, especially if you think about of somebody in a service position. When they receive criticism from a client, how they respond is crucial, right? We need to agree and be empathetic. We can't just be defensive and not deal with it well. We need to say, we're sorry, how can we make it better, and move on. And then another big issue or weakness of S's typically is that they are weak at prioritization. So in most all jobs these days, I've had very few times where somebody says, I don't have enough to do, right? And the question is, are we working on the right thing right now? As a D, that's of utmost importance to me. That if I've got 10 people, I want all 10 people doing the most important thing of the hour and of the day and of the week. I don't want them to get around to the most important thing after the other 9 things are done in their own time. And so one thing that's really important to do for S personalities, if you're managing a team or on a team, is go ahead and give directive of what is most important and prioritize them in order of importance, because they don't do it on their own very well. Another technique here is time blocking specific to tasks. So saying, hey, for the first hour of the day, I want you to do blank, which as the boss or as a coworker, you think is the most important thing for the project. And then the last hour of the day, you might say, this is kind of your catch up or work on special projects time. Communication. Security matters. And so like I said, if you're asking for anything that's, anything at all, honestly, in communication, explain the why, and that it's normal and that it's the process. When you're communicating with a peer, it's starting with, hey, I love you to death, and I just wanted to touch base on a few things regarding this. The reason why I'm asking is A, B, and C. Can we catch up for this meeting? Don't just set a meeting with somebody. They're thinking, oh my God, what did I do? Am I being fired? All those things, because in the absence of information, remember, they jump to worst case conclusions. So communication is just really explain, we're on track of things. Things are steady. There's not going to be any change. The reason why I'm doing this is A, B, and C. So the greatest fear after I said security safe over and over and over again is loss of security, okay? So in business, quite often, many of us have heard the idea of CYA, which I don't need to explain that in too much detail, but cover your butt, right? And I've actually been to seminars or to service classes where people say, hey, listen, cover everything. And I'm here to tell you as a professional salesperson and leader of people, that is not the truth. You're rocking the boat by saying everything's good as long as A, B, C, D, and E go well, because what that means is everything's not good until all 5 of those things have happened for S's, right? So it's the idea of ignorance of bliss, I believe, comes from talking with and communicating with S's, right? Everything's great. We're on track for whatever we're working on, boss. Next step is this. Do this next, and we'll follow up on next Tuesday or whatever the follow-up plan is, until there's a problem. Now, when there is a problem, you must deal with it with the plan, right? So if you're dealing with a problem at work with a client, whatever, you have to say, hey, listen, I've identified a problem. Here it is. Here's why it's a problem, and I've already thought of 3 possible solutions: A, B, and C. Which one would you like me to do? So do the work up front. Don't just say, hey, there's a problem, we're working on it, I'll call you back when I figure it out. That would make your life even worse, okay? It'll make their life even worse. So it's just really important to understand that rocking the boat, not good for S's. And if you don't know who you're talking to, 60% of the chance of the time you're gonna be right, that's an S, so just fix the problem on your own and then let them know what the solution is, okay? Last but not least, you're dealing with C personalities. So 10% D's, 15% I's, 60% S's. That leaves the 15% remaining are the C personalities, okay? C's keep the D's out of jail. They are compliance-oriented, right? I laugh about that because I'm in the finance world. I love having compliance people. I love having underwriters and funders and people that tell me what I can and can't do, because D's and I's are typically yes people. Yeah, we can do that, no problem at all. And so C's are the rule followers. They're accurate. They're analytical. You know, if you think about different positions you would want these people to hold, IT positions, awesome. When you think about like CFOs, I definitely want a detail-oriented person looking at at every dollar and cent coming in and out. Very analytical. They have high standards of themselves and of everyone around them. They're systematic. They're fact finders. They're precise. So when you think about that, about who you know, I think about really great attorneys. I think about really great CPAs. I think about really great mathematicians. Logic-based people that are detail-oriented are typically a C, right? I did not say emotion. I said logic, and that's one of the major differences here. So kind of making sure we get this all kind of focal pointed in. S's and I's are the emotional ones. D's and C's are the logical ones. So that would be a really great indicator of if your spouse is logical, you give bullet points. It's kind of the same kind of thing. So what's the value of the team? Perspective is a big one. I call it the anchor of reality. If you think about it like a D says, I don't want to be Uberized, let's do this. The I says, great idea, follow me. The S will say, yes, boss, no problem. Tell me what step 1, 2, and 3 is. And the C says, let's think about this for a second. And let's make sure that it's in the budget. Or let's make sure we haven't missed anything. And it's a really valuable piece of any team or any company. They're conscientious. They're even-tempered. It's very difficult to get them to fly off the handle, whereas highly emotional people might be more volatile, right? It's the job, and I'm going to be professional at my job, and I'm going to do the job very, very well. And they're typically thorough in all activities. The question that a C asks themselves internally all the time is how? How do I do this? How does this work? If you've ever seen a child, one of my best friend's sons, I guarantee you this guy's going to be an architect or an engineer. So he takes Legos to a whole new level. Like at age 3 and 4, he was making castles and entire cities, working cities out of Legos, and creating and recreating and constructing and reconstructing. And his dad actually, when he gets a cool device, a camera even, he wants to take it apart for some strange reason to figure out how it works. And I think that's a really cool thing. But what are they motivated by? They're motivated by achievement. Okay. One of the key things to understand here is a C identifies themselves as their work. If their work is great, they are great. If their work is poor, they are poor. It's not a reality, but that is a belief system that C's typically have. Okay. So what's the weakness? They need clear-cut boundaries for actions and relationships. They need the boundaries. They need to be told, here's the box to work, or here's the rules of engagement in, and they do very well with those rules of engagement. They are bound by procedures. They're bound by methods. So these are people typically that if we've done it forever this way, we're going to keep doing it this way forever. Why would we change something that's working? And again, in this day and age of business, I think that can definitely be a weakness if they're not thinking of a new, better way to solve the problem. They get bogged down in the details. The statement, what is it? Something of analysis. Paralysis of analysis. Thank you very much. Paralysis of analysis. I think that is a C-oriented answer. It's just, it's hard to make a decision because there's a lot more that we can do in research here, where sometimes in business or at home, we just make a decision and move on. What are we going to do? What does your gut tell you, right? They prefer not to verbalize their feelings, which is sometimes very difficult because you think everything's hunky-dory and they hate you or they're annoyed by you, and they'll never tell you because that's not professional, right? Though they'd rather give in rather than argue. And I do think this can be a weakness in relationships and in business, because I'm not asking you to win the argument, I'm asking you for you to defend your side, and because in my personality style, as a D, I'm okay with a little bit of argumentation. I just want to understand, what do you think, and then we'll decide together on the best possible outcome. A C sometimes just says, yeah, you know what, you're right, and moves on. And if you don't know that about people, then you might think you're right, and it'll never be questioned because they know that they're right. They don't need to prove it to you. That's how C's think, okay? Communication. Holy cow. This is the emails I get that are like 3 pages long. I don't read them, unless the title, the subject line literally says, Josh, really important, please read in its entirety. So my team knows that about me, so they'll literally do that. But when you're emailing a C, it's literally a who, what, when, where, why, and how. Okay. Not everyone in this call is a salesperson, but I do believe if you talk to anyone, you're selling yourself, right? If you're talking with a C, if you omit information that the C thinks is important, then they think you're hiding it from them. It's just kind of a truth. And real estate is a great example. When I coach realtors around the nation, one thing I tell realtors is if you're working with a C, you better point out every fallacy with every house you walk into. Point out the cracks. Point out that we need to get more information from inspector on this idea. It's really important to prove that you're worthy of the professional title or of the job that they've tasked you with. And so let's just go through the exquisite detail all the way through. I'm going to tie all these in the next class back to the closing techniques and of each of the styles. But before I move on, if there's any questions from the studio audience, I didn't know if there was. Otherwise, we can save it for the end. Is there anything that popped up that I need to address right now?
Yeah, sure. Can you just one more time list what each one stands for again, and the percentages of the population?
Absolutely. So a D is your driver. A driver is 10% of the population. An I is an influencer, the salesperson, the people person, and that's a 15 percentile of the population. An S is your stable person. Steady, stable is the word you would use, and that is 60% of the population. And a C is a compliant person, and that's 15% of the population. Great question. Anything else?
Yeah, I actually have a question from Tiffany, and she asked to talk more about how people can jump between the 4 personality types depending on the situation.
I love that, and that's exactly what we're going to start working our way into. So the question from Tiffany was, how do you jump from, and I think it all starts with, how do you know who you're talking to if you've never met them before? It might be easier, you can, listening to this webinar, you might be able to clearly identify your best friend or your spouse. But what about that one-off interaction? What about you're walking into an interview for the first time and you want the leg up and you don't know who this person is, or a possible client or referring partner, right? So I think it's worth tying right into that, because that's really the starting point. So before Dr. Tingle had to leave, one of the things I was asking him before this webinar started was, hey, I know that you teach this in your class on leadership. How do you find out what somebody is? And one of the things he teaches is just ask how the day was, right? So when you ask somebody how's their day, they're going to have a long answer or they're going to have a short answer, right? Emotional people, long answers, long-winded. Logical people, time-oriented people, short answers. So I love that, because that's very similar to something that we do and what I train at my company for all my people on my team to do, which is basically to ask yourself 2 questions in identifying who you're dealing with. Let me start by saying that it is so important to me that we understand this at my company, that literally every single person on my team has their DISC personality profile taped up on the wall next to their head, so that when I walk up to talk to them about something that I need or want, or just to check in, I first look at who they are, and then I implement, the conversation. So if I walk up to I literally start by saying, how was your weekend? How was your day? My point is that it's important for us to utilize that. And so the direct answer to Tiffany is speak their language. That's the answer. There's a great book called The 5 Love Languages. It's not about DISC per se, but basically it suggests that there's 5 love languages in the world, and we all have our primary and secondary love language. Those 5 love languages are quality time, words of affirmation, physical touch, gifts, and acts of service. Thank you very much. Acts of service, quality time, physical touch, words of affirmation, and gifts. And so I'll just use my wife and I as an example. Okay, my wife is a acts of service and quality time person. Okay, so basically she doesn't want to tell me to do the dishes, but if I go around, do the dishes, do some daddy do lists without being asked, then she feels loved. And her idea of a great afternoon is to sit on the couch and drink coffee together and chat about stuff, like nothing important, just look at each other's eyes and talk, right? When she does that, she feels loved. She thinks she's making me feel loved too, and it couldn't be further from the truth, because my 2 are words of affirmation and physical touch. So what I do when I want to love on my wife and her is I'll say, hey babe, you look hot today. Really love that dress. Or I'll go up and give her a back massage when she's sitting on the couch and just literally physically put my hands on her, among other things as a married couple. But that's how I feel love, and it's if I want more of my love language, what the book suggests is you got to give them more of their love language first, right? And that's the key. So I'm tying that back to this DISC personality, because if you want somebody to like you or want to work harder for you or work with you or whatever, or want to hire you themselves, you have to make them like you first. And people like people that like them, right? You've heard the most powerful word in the English language is their name, right? Say their name a lot and they're going to like you more. Just turns out that way. Ask them a lot about them and they're going to like you more. You might not say much about yourself at all, but they leave an interview and they smoke the whole time. They love you. No problem at all. So let's talk about the 2 questions that will really help you identify this even over the phone. And so the questions that I'm going to give you are meant to be asked internally. Don't ask them directly. Ask these questions internally. So in your normal rapport building, if you're not good at rapport building, you're looking for tactics. I always use the acronym FORD: family, occupation, recreation, dreams. Talk about their family, talk about their occupation, talk about their recreation, talk about their dreams. So when you're going through that general warm-up conversation of building rapport, the first question you ask yourself is this person assertive or non-assertive? Assertive, non-assertive, assertive, non-assertive. So I might ask a question like, hey, how was your weekend? Or, hey, I understand that you're inquiring for a mortgage. What is it that you're looking for? And an assertive person will say, I want A, B, and C, and this is how I want to do it. Or really lean in. They're a little bit louder. They have bigger hand gestures if you're face-to-face. But you can pretty clearly tell an assertive person the first 2 or 3 sentences out of their mouth. And don't take that verbatim, but just ask a few more in that family, occupation, recreation, dreams, and you'll get to know if they're assertive or not. So once you've identified assertive or not assertive, so a non-assertive answer might be, let's just use my industry. Somebody's calling about a mortgage. So I'll say, hey, out of curiosity, why are you calling me? And they'll say, well, we're getting started with the process, and we think we might want to buy a house this year, and my agent said that one of the first steps is getting pre-qualified, so that's why I gave you a call. That's not an assertive answer, right? And so now you can key in on who the assertive personalities are. So for sure, an assertive personality is going to be a D, and the other assertive personality is going to be an I. So you've got your drivers and your salespeople, they're both assertive, okay? The non-assertive people you've narrowed it down to are your S's and your C's, right? So now at least you have a 50% chance you're talking to the right person. You keep your conversation going, and the second question that you're asking yourself internally is this person emotional or logical? Emotional, logical, emotional, logical, emotional, logical. And as you go through the Q&A, open-ended questions that you're asking people, logical questions are going to be numbers, stats, next steps, figures, matter of fact. An emotional answer is quite often a fear-based answer, or it's bubbly and flowers, and they speak in pictures. That's an indication that's an emotional person, right? So, if I said, hey, how was your weekend? Then they would say, oh my God, it was amazing. The sun was beautiful. We had the whole family out for a picnic. And man, I really enjoyed watching my daughter play soccer this weekend. I'm so proud of her. I mean, what's not to be proud about my daughter, right? And that's obviously an emotional answer. You can pick that up just like that. And on the logic side is like, how was your weekend? It was great. My son broke his arm a week ago. This weekend he's fine. We're moving in the right direction. How is yours? It's just kind of assertive and quick and to the point and logic based. It's like, if there's nothing to talk about, there's nothing specific that happened, there's nothing to talk about, right? So you can really narrow it down. Once you've done that, we know that the emotional people are going to be your S's and your I's. And you know that your logical people are your D's and your C's. So now you can, look at your little metrics and look at it and say, hey, if I have an aggressive, logical person, it's a D. If I've got a aggressive, emotional person, it's an I. If I've got a non-aggressive, emotional person, it's an S. If I've got a logical, non-aggressive person, it's a C. And so that's how you know who you're talking to in the first 2 or 3, 4 sentences of a meeting. If you practice this, by the way, you'll get really good really fast. By the way, I'd asked you the question when I first walked in, or we were talking about like what people wear. And one thing that popped up was like, I think that you're a D, I think you're a C, and I just kind of went around the room and said, I think I'm an I because I've got flowery colors on, purple and green and stuff. And you just start to recognize the general characteristics because you're just testing yourself all the time, and you get better and better and better at it. So I didn't know if Tiffany had any follow-up questions to that, but that would kind of round that one out.
Yeah, well, so we've had a few others that have come in. Number one, if we have an opportunity to provide some visuals.
Sure.
And this is kind of a quadrant test. This was another question so that people can naturally follow along or have further resources post-presentation. And then also, is there any correlation to Myers-Briggs from DISC?
There is. Certainly Myers-Briggs, different color tests, there's definitely correlations. And you'll see when you basically, if you just read, the best way to do it is take 4 different tests, different personality tests, and just read who you are. Because there's no arguing who you are. And once you start to understand who you are, and you start to, and then take somebody that's really close to you that you think you know who they are, and then read their results, then you'll get to really key in on whether they're emotional, logical, or whatever. As far as a metrics a matrix, yes, there will be after this. I'm going to send out a matrix that we use. There's not really basically yes, we'll follow up with a visual aid that you guys can use afterwards. That will, in fact, I'll type it out and it'll be really detailed for you, so I don't have to recreate the wheel. When I'm walking through this, I think one of the problems that a lot of people have is that in starting to learn more about people, you have to be more interested in people, right? And not all of us are naturally wired that way. And so if you start with, okay, I'm naturally curious and interested in it, then and you take a test on yourself and take a test of somebody that you love and adore and that you know really well, that's a great starting point. And if you correlate that with what I'll provide afterwards, just so you have something tangible to work off of, and which will help you on the follow-up on Monday of next week when we dive into the closing kind of stuff. As far as, grab a seat, please. As far as to kind of round this out, I kind of want to put some other pictures on what people kind of wear, what they typically do. What are some other indicators? If there's no other questions specifically to how do you find out what somebody is, I think the key is what do you do with it, right? As kind of a teaser, because I got to go into a lot of detail on next Monday's meeting, I want to explain how people make buying decisions. So I already said that when it really comes down to it, just like the 5 love languages, we need to speak to somebody else in their language. It's of utmost importance that when you're helping somebody make a decision in a career path, in a job opportunity, in a sale, in a purchase, whatever it is, that you absolutely speak to them in their words, their communication style. If you've ever bought something before that you felt dirty when you bought it, like it was like a dirty sales, this dirty sales guy, it might be a word you might have used. It's not that they were a dirty sales guy, they were just selling you the way they like to be sold. That's why it felt dirty. And so I think about not only that, but how many opportunities we miss out on trying to convince somebody. I think of what the definition of leadership is, and I define it as influence. If you're trying to influence somebody to buy something, to do more, to be more productive for the company, to have better results at the company or whatever, all we're trying to do is influence people. And there's no better way to influence people than to speak their language. That goes for sure in helping them make decisions, which goes in the closing side of things, okay? So if you understand that that's the feeling, then all I've got to do now is, okay, now I know how they're wired. How do I speak to them their way to help them make a decision? Once you ask those questions, then, I always think of it in terms of this. People make decisions with their head, their heart, or their gut, okay? Innately, we all started by making decisions with our gut. Whether you believe in whatever, it's not an argument about Judeo-Christian values or whatever. I'm just saying that at some point we were being chased by things with pointy teeth, and you ran like hell, or you wouldn't be here. Your ancestors would have been eaten, okay? Even if it was 100 years ago or 200 years ago, somebody in a trench, somebody had fight or flight in them. That was a gut decision. They didn't have to think about it. They just got out of the way, okay? Along the last couple centuries, obviously, we've had, or lots, more than centuries now, a couple thousand years, we've also created communities. And so with communities, we started to care about how other people felt. We had to include other people, right? And also in there, we started to get these big brains that we decided to use, our mammalian brains instead of our reptilian brains. to overthink things and be super analytical, which is great. That's why we have cell phones. We can talk to somebody on the other side of the world, but it slows down our ability to make a decision. And so what I'm going to speak about next week in exquisite detail is how do you get people to just get from their thinking modality or their emotional choice making to a gut decision, which is how people want to make a decision when it's all said and done and feel good about it. So I think that's all I've got for now. Do you have any follow-up questions or anything that we need to deal with?
We do have 2 other questions.
Yeah.
Logan wants to know, and maybe it's in your personal life, any recognizable negatives for labeling people?
Yeah, absolutely. So buyer beware, right? So one of the things that you think about what the 2 strongest characters are that like shine like a big thumb out there, like you typically label a C or a D first. Yet that's only 25% of the populace. You're like, this guy's a jerk. He's super demanding, and so he must be a D. Or on the flip side, on the C, it's like, oh my God, this guy's asking for too much. He's asking too many questions, too much detail. This guy's for sure a C. So negatively in business, when we start to label the wrong way, what ends up happening is you miss the mark. I mean, I remember that I had, also in personalities, one thing we haven't talked about is that there's a adaptive and a natural style to personalities. And so some of us start to act a different way in business because we think we have to. It's not how we want to do it, but that's what tends to happen over time. There's also a secondary modality. Like I said really clearly, I'm a 100D and 99I. I'm also a 12S and a 0C. So yes, 100% I'm a D, I'm a driver, I'm a doer, give me bullet points, but you can still hurt my feelings because I'm a high I. And if you hurt my feelings, the problem is that I like to work with people that I like. I mean, it's just that simple. So you can't just only do one thing, but that's the final, it increases your odds on the outcome of a good outcome when you speak to and start working on these modalities. What was the second? Is that?
Yeah, so actually the adaptive style, maybe you can mention a little more on that, because I have a question about how much of your personality depends on time and environment.
Yeah, so I would say most of it depends on time and environment, in my opinion. So one thing that's really interesting, I was sharing with the guys in the room, I am naturally an introvert, which is weird for a sales guy to say because, I produce at a very high level. At the end of the day, I do think that sales skills, this is a piece of what we're talking about, and don't think salesmen, think sales skills, right? There's 4 parts of the sale. There's initial contact, building rapport, closing skills, and follow-up. So closing skills is one part of it, but the rapport building is what we've really been diving into. I think that it really just comes down to understanding and being curious about people around you and wanting to give them a better experience. And so whether that be, I want to be a better boss, so I want to motivate and inspire my people, and they're not all motivated and inspired the same way. Or I want to make my client feel more cared for, and they don't all like to communicate my way. Or I want to do more business, and they don't all like to be sold my way. Then that's where the real benefit peaks up. So as far as the natural versus adaptive style, we're all born one way. That's who we are. That's also where we're happiest. So if we can operate in a modality where we're if we're a high C, give me lots of numbers to crack. I mean, that's just something that makes C's happy. Give them opportunities to create and hold people accountable to processes and procedures. But for sure, don't give a high I outdoor salesperson any of those jobs ever because they'll be unhappy. So I think about the outdoor salesperson that has to turn in a expense account. Necessary, possibly. Mandatory for some companies, for sure. Are they unhappy? For sure. If they have to do that every week of their life, would their C naturally creep up in their adaptive style? Yes. Or if you're the head of the IT department and you're all C, but now you have to develop some leadership skills because now you've got 5 other IT people working around you, would you see your D start to go up? Yes. But we are happiest when we're operating in what we are naturally. What I like to do is once a year, I'll make my whole team retake the DISC personality test. And it's been a reason that I've actually moved people within my team to different jobs. Because I'm like, hey, you're really great at this, but I don't think you're happy. And they'll be like, why do you say that? And I just point out the natural versus adaptive style. I don't think you like doing this. You're good at it, don't get me wrong, but what if we just had you do just this all day long? How would that make you feel? They're like, their eyes light up like, oh my God, you would do that for me? So that's where the adaptive and natural really show up and percolate. And I think it just goes back to how do you run a highly effective team, or how do you have a great experience for clients, external or internal? That's how you do it, is just use it to speak their way more.
Okay. We don't have any, unless there's further questions from the audience. We'd like to remind everybody that Josh is going to continue the second part of the webinar next Monday at 12 noon Central.
I'll be here.
And we'll get into a little bit more depth on this. But without any other questions, then I think we can conclude for today.
Thank you for listening to Head Janitor. We'll talk to you next week.